Right, let's make a start. We've got okay. So everybody currently here, I think knows the sort my feet out. Everybody here knows the basic routine. If anybody hasn't come across that and is watching online afterwards, then just as always go nice and easily. Whether it's you're new to this or whether you've done it lots of times before, just giving yourself a chance to settle in. Thinking in broad terms about the overall sort of outline, if you like, of your posture. So weight forwards, hips just settling back. This feeling of overhanging through lower back, hips and buttocks. You see, and like this, they're directly above my knees and my ankles, but there's pressure on my knees, pressure on my ankles. As soon as I do this, then with that overhanging, it drops my center of gravity down. Once you've got to a point where the muscles of your legs, in particular the quadriceps, but other muscles as well, are conditioned enough to be comfortable in this slightly backward position, then they will support your weight, they will support your center of gravity, transmit your center of gravity downwards, and you'll find that hips, knees, ankles gradually begin to soften. It takes time. And remember, if you do get to a point where the muscles here particularly are kind of stiffening up and shaking, then shake out. That often is just enough to loosen them up. The aching, the really sharp aching, and the shaking are sometimes at least due to just the blood not circulating properly at that point, because the muscles have sort of like stiffened up. So shaking out can help. If it continues, then maybe take a rest. Turning from the middle of your body. So if I place my hand here, you'll see my hand is moving, and that movement is moving my rib cage from there into my shoulders. And you can even feel, if you place a hand there, sometimes you can feel the muscles working. Same thing on your lower back. Same thing on your hips. So this broad outline of the posture that we start with starts to be sort of filled in with detail. In the upper part of the body, as your rib cage turns, your shoulders are being pulled around, and that in turn moves your arms. Try and feel what's happening, the muscles of your chest and your upper back. And just let that awareness of those different areas of your body and anything else that you're noticing just become part of the whole picture. So we build up an impression, a mental image of what we might think of as the inner landscape of our body. Everything that we do could be seen as a way of building up that picture and exploring what's actually going on in the body, so that we can work with it more creatively, more precisely. And as always, the effort of doing that is always valuable, whether you're sort of like feeling it's successful or not, because it draws our attention in. And quite often I've found that the Tai Chi practice sessions that I've done that have felt the most difficult, can't quite focus, can't quite get that particular move to work, can't quite get your weight down, those sort of things, are often the ones that at the end of it I feel the most benefit from, because I've been having to make more effort to focus. So we want to be able to progress with these arts, and a good deal of that is a physical progression, getting the movements to work better in one way or another, refining posture, refining how we move. But it's by no means the whole story. And I think that kind of progression, that kind of development is something we look back on. It's not a sort of like quick, I think in a couple of weeks you're going to get this. Like you look back over a few weeks, a few months, a few years even. Just become aware of the patterns of movement within your body. Everything focused on this center part of the body. It's this center part of the body you're trying to get to drop down, to root down. It's the center part of the body that when you move, directs your arms. And essentially, this is described as being like the hub of a wheel. If you imagine like a bike wheel, all the spokes going into the hub and then radiating out to the rim, then you can think of those sort of connections from that center part of your body, really to all parts of your body. But I suppose to start off with, in particular, your arms, and they're followed by your legs. So that awareness, what's happening within your body, encourages a change in how we move, a reorientation of our awareness. We very often get very sort of stuck in our awareness in the upper part of the body. This seems to be true for all of us. There's a constant sort of instruction almost in arts like Tai Chi to always bring your attention back to your feet, your hips, your waist. It's very easy to lose touch and for the movement to become very fragmented. But one of the attributes of Tai Chi, I always feel, is that fragmentation just begins to coalesce. We feel more together, if you like. These opening exercises are good for that. I think it's probably easier to create that feeling of one movement rather than different parts of your body moving and trying to coordinate them. When we're moving a little bit faster, the rhythm is one aspect of that connection that you may notice. For instance, and it's easier to maintain, to detect and maintain a rhythm that's slightly quicker. And it also has the advantage of being just a little bit aerobic, very gently raising your heartbeat, your body temperature. And see if you can just apply an image of something like moving through water, which is the most common one that we would use, but or as though the air is thicker around you, some kind of resistance, some kind of soft resistance, not like sort of trying to move your hand through sort of thick concrete or something like that, but like trying to move your hand through water. It encourages a softening in the body and at the same time a strengthening in a particular way. And that sense of resistance also encourages that idea of the whole body moving as one unit. A couple of slow, gentle breaths. If it suits you to be more aware of your breathing, then you can think about breathing deeper down into your belly. And with some of the exercises I might mention, sort of take an in breath here, and that might also be a useful thing. If it doesn't suit you to focus on your breathing, then that's fine. Your breathing will develop with the development in the posture. The basic principle of breathing is what we call bellows breathing, or abdominal breathing, to draw the air down and into our lungs by expanding, or by beginning to expand in the belly first of all, then in the solar plexus, then in the upper part of the chest. So it's like your body does this, and that's like, if you use a pair of bellows to pump a fire with, you draw the handles apart, and it draws the air down into the bag. So rather than straining our chest to force the air down, then we need to reverse that. But that's very dependent on posture. If you're habitually pulling your belly in, for instance, which is very common, or even if you're tightening your lower back, it's not going to be so easy to do. And if you try and force it, then you'll just create tension and stiffness. So our bodies wouldn't naturally breathe like that. If we get a little bit out of breath, we tend to, if you've been running or something like that, we tend to sort of do that so that the belly can relax. So it's not an unusual way of breathing, but trying to find it in the upright stance is quite difficult. And then just raising your arms as well. So when we do this, that feeling of movement travels up a little bit into the solar plexus. You can play around with this. You could raise your hands up no higher than shoulder height, and then lower them down again. Raise up. And just get a sense for those changes within that inner landscape of the body. Where do you feel a response within your body to the positioning of your arms? Another thing you can do, a bit more subtle, but as you go through this, I come closer so you can see, you just rotate your hands so the palms are in, and then down, and then out, and then just gently move through that. And again, just feeling change. I tend to feel it in the side of my body, but you may feel it elsewhere. It's a process of observation. And I think one way of looking at everything that we do is we offer an instruction to our body: do this movement, make this action, and we observe how the body's doing it, and then we can bring up a degree of discrimination into that. It's like, no, that's not a good way of doing it. We might, for instance, with our weight forwards, we might just automatically do this to pull ourselves back to stop a sense of being pulled forward. Well, this is wrong. You can see my back is bent and so on and so forth. No, actually, I'd rather do that. And you allow that to happen. And if it's not happening, work out why it's not happening. Where is the block? But nothing should be imposed. And then just shake out. So to get a better sense of our posture, just begin to rock your weight forwards and backwards a little bit in your feet. Again, I'll come a bit closer. And what we want to do is, in the first instance, you'll probably find that your heels and your toes are coming off the ground. That, of course, makes you quite unstable. So that's not particularly useful for us at the moment. So we moderate the movement, and you'll probably find that your range of movement is somewhere between the ball of each foot and the front part of the heel. Remember, hips dropping down, nice and soft. And we're moving forwards and backwards in front of and behind the center line of the body. So if I stand like this and you see the pole is just behind the ball of my foot, and when I stand like this, it comes out roughly in line with the crown of my head. So what I'm doing right now is this. I'm going forwards and then back and then forwards and then back. Imagine that you're sort of tethered to the line like a boat tied to a pole in the river or the sea, moving around a little bit but not going too far, and not going so far that you create this stiffening, this tightening, and gradually slow the movement down until you reach a point where you feel as though you're sort of in line with that pole. This is the feeling of central equilibrium, to give it one title. There's other things that it could be called. I quite like the term central equilibrium. I like the idea of equilibrium rather than necessarily balance. I think that's a better way of thinking of it. And we come to rest there, and we get aware of a certain quality of spaciousness, of stillness, of being rooted, of being in equilibrium. And we realize if you go back to this, just rocking forwards and backwards, you can maintain those qualities in certain ways. So as I go forwards, I get to hear my knees are stiff. I'm losing that quality. So the response to that would be just trying to let go in my hips just a little bit more. There will still be a point where I go too far, but we're trying to maintain that quality and the quality of the movement we associate with it in all of the movements. We move out from central equilibrium and cyclically come back, and then move out and come back. And this is the basic rhythm of Tai Chi: expanding outwards, contracting inwards. So coming to rest, sinking down and pushing up. So the sinking down is my hips going back. And if I'm, say, for instance, tight in my lower back and my hips go back, I fall over for obvious reasons. So what I want to try and do is to create the space in the center of my body so that as my hips drop, my pelvis can just make little adjustments. Again, it helps you put your hands on your belly and on your lower back. You may feel that little bit of movement there. If I stiffen my back, this happens. I'm falling backwards. If I soften my back, if you look there, look at my back. If I soften my back, then my pelvis would just adjust so that happens. Same with the belly. You don't want to pull your belly in. You don't want the muscles here tight, hard. And in any case, remember that you might be using them to help you breathe in. So expanding and contracting, bringing your hands around as though you're cradling the ball. And just see how much of this you can maintain as we go through the different movements. Lifting the ball, drop your hips, shoulders follow, drawing your hands down. Still with that image of moving through water. Still aware of the movements in the landscape of the body, much as you might be aware, if you went to a field or some area of landscape or a wood or whatever. As you sat there or walked around, you might become more aware of subtle changes in the breeze, the sounds around you, the sights. So you become more in tune with these subtle changes within your body. Change into the wild goose with this image of the bird in flight. We begin to work with that awareness. We observe the changes that are happening in the way that I described before, and then we maybe try and influence them. And that's a very tricky process. A lot of it is done through imagery, like the image of the bird in flight. Any sort of deliberate conscious changes, I'm going to put my hip here, or my knee should go there, should be done very, very carefully, because they're often very subtle, and conscious movements tend to be a bit too big in a lot of cases. So a sort of light touch with those changes And always bear in mind that if, say, for instance, you go down, you've got a knee twisted in, and you think, well, okay, I'm going to rotate that knee out. It will probably twist in again because the muscles will take time to condition. Just be patient. Don't wrench and stiffen your knee and grit your teeth and think, right, I'm definitely not going to let the knee twist in this time. It's not going to work. And then parting the clouds. Lovely sort of expanding, opening movement. Not going to a full stretch, maintaining that sense of spaciousness within your body. We'll do this one more time. And then go back to the first of these, rooting down, doing them in a little sequence. So take your time in the changeover, don't rush, complete each movement. Trying to feel each stage of the movement, bringing your hands out. And dropping down. And just letting your hands swing round from your elbows to start the set again. So your feet and your hips, between your feet and your hips, the movement is the same. That's sinking down and pushing up. But from your hips up into the crown of your head, your fingers and so on and so forth, there's 3 different patterns, very subtle changes between them. You see if you can follow this a little bit. I always showed it here. There's more of an emphasis of expansion in my belly. And then starting off in my belly, but moving up a little bit to solar plexus, lower part of the chest. And then belly, solar plexus, and up into that upper part of the chest. So by the time we get to parting the clouds, the third of the sequence, we're again beginning to experience that sense of expansion, belly, solar plexus, chest. So the final stage of each set of movements, the parting the cloud stage, may be an opportunity just to take a breath in, see how this feels, using that expansion that you're slowly becoming aware of. Don't feel that the in-breath has to go at the same pace or for the same time as the movement itself. Just be aware of how far it can go. When it feels right to breathe out, then breathe out. Don't hold your breath. And that's quite a good way of just introducing the sort of patterning of your breath with the movements that you're making. One more round. And then change into dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So here, pushing up, doing the expansion. First of all, pushing your elbow out. And then at a given point, before it reaches the height of your shoulder, your elbow will drop down and that swings your hand up. Very soft in your shoulder. So following that same line of expansion from down up through your body, but more emphasis in the sides of your body. We'll do this one more time. And then hands to your sides by your hips, and then pushing up, again expanding and contracting. As we do this one, we don't go up and down in our hips, but you want to keep that feeling of your hips hanging back. That allows the movement downwards through your body, the stream of movement, gravity, pulling everything down. So see if you can just be aware of that very subtle downward movement through your body. And then aware of the neutralizing movement, the response to that downward movement in your body, particularly your legs, which is to sort of build this upward movement, not straining, because the posture shouldn't require that, but nevertheless, almost like the feeling you'd get if you get a ball or a block of wood and you push it down into a bowl of water, you feel that pressure upwards, what we call the buoyancy of the water. So we have that cycle of movement downward and upward, which in the case of this exercise gets directed through the center of your body. Once again, hips, waist. And remember, like the hub of the wheel. So on a bicycle, you push the pedals down and it turns the hub, and the hub directs the movement to the wheel along the spokes. Very similar sort of dynamic going on here. In the case of a bike, the circular movement is translated into a horizontal one, of course. Now, let your hands drop down. Just be aware of the weight of your arms. Expanding on one side, pushing your arm out, and just allowing it to swing up until it reaches that center line of your body and then down. Notice that my hand is slightly in front of my body. Just drawing your fingers back as far as you can. Remember, wrists can get a bit tight, so don't strain. Elbows slightly curved. And then, if it's comfortable for you, just a little turn here. Drawing your hand across a little bit. Switching sides. And again, if it's comfortable, the turn. So this and the previous movement using the horizontal rotation in that hub of the body. But unlike the bicycle wheel, you can move in more than one plane. So now sinking down and pushing up a little bit. And as you sink down, just rotating in the center of your body, pushing your hips back so that your head goes forward, and then reversing that, letting the pelvis tuck under again before you push up. Just feel what's happening in your back and your legs, and particularly your back, just nice and easy. You're not bending forwards. You're not bending the back. You're tilting, so your head is going out there. And obviously that's quite strong in your back. So just see how you're responding. You're nice and easy with this and the next, well, with all of them really, but particularly on your back. And this time, rowing a boat in the middle of the lake, your arms following the movement. And again, just notice whether you're tightening up in your upper back or your shoulders, in which case you're probably overdoing the arms. Very soft, almost like your back were being very gently massaged. One more time. The next movement combines the horizontal and the vertical rotation. As you come to the upright position, just bringing your hands around in front of your belly, turn. Then push your hips back. Then swing your hips across to the other side. And back in. I turn around, you can see there. I'm exaggerating the turn a little bit. Polishing the table. One more time. And then just shake out. So central equilibrium could be seen as being the feeling that we want to maintain all the time, the quality of movement, the alignment, the stability and everything that goes with that. And it's one thing to find it here. It's quite another to maintain it while you're in movement. If I get a pen, for instance, I can't do this very well, but yeah, I could, in theory, take this pen and just balance it on my finger in perfect alignment. What would most likely happen is, and I'll try it on the palm of my hand, is that I'd have to keep moving around. So it's very, very hard to maintain, and you shouldn't stiffen up. I could hold it like that, but it's meant to be freeform. And as it moves, I'd have to move and then move back and so on and so forth. So we shouldn't regard it as a fixed state, but rather something that we pass through on a regular basis. Our problems come when we don't come back. So if it was all about kind of expansion, then eventually we'd lose touch with it completely. Like again, the boat tethered to a pole in the sea, it gets pushed away, but then it gets drawn back. If it didn't get drawn back, it would snap the rope. So we come back to these qualities, we remind ourselves. It's just a natural process. So yang would be the extending movement outwards, yin would be the drawing back in, and we look for a balance between those two stages of movement. With that very much in mind, change your posture. Turn one foot out, step forwards with the left foot. Notice that my feet are hip width apart. I haven't stepped there, I've stepped there. And length is about the same. It could be a little bit longer, but not a huge stride. And just beginning to transfer your weight from front to back. So when I was standing in the parallel stance, I showed the pole. If I do this now, you'll see here, it's roughly in line with the board of my back foot. And then I'm going to have to move it out a bit, I'll trip over it. Then when I go forwards, it's coming towards the board of the foot. It won't quite reach there yet. You'll only get about 60% of your weight in the front foot, no more than 70 in the back foot at the moment. But the point is that as I move, I'm maintaining the upright position. I'm not, and this is a very common habit, I'm not doing this. I'm not leaning forwards and then bringing the rest of my body forwards. I'm pushing from below, I'm pushing from the ground. And this is a significant sort of mental shift, I think, to try and move from the ground like this. But it's definitely an aid to maintaining the quality of central equilibrium, that thing being in line with the pull of gravity whilst you're in movement. To begin with, the upper body feels quite passive. We actually say the upper body sits on our hips. But if you imagine moving through water, if I were in water and I just moved here, did nothing with my upper part of my body, the water pressure would push my shoulders back, and then I'd have to do that. So if you can apply that image again, then you'll begin to realize that, again, there are these little subtle movements and changes within that inner landscape of your upper body. And those changes will be the basis for the movements that we do with the upper body using this transfer of the weight. But for now, just raise your toes, and this is where you may slip back just a little bit more. Try and have a sense of where you found your central alignment when we did that little rocking exercise at the start of the class. And imagine that, you know, from the back foot to the front foot, there's a line that you're going to move along. This front foot is slightly turned out here. You move along that line towards that point in the empty foot, until eventually, with your toes and your heel coming up like this, you find that almost, you know, you're almost exactly over that, and that's when you just begin to step, bringing your foot in, push out. If it's the front foot, the heel goes down, then the toes, then your weight. Draw your foot in. When you push out, it's the ball of your foot, then your heel, then your weight. So one of the reasons we don't have too long a step is because we want to be able to plant our foot down accurately before we commit our weight. Like you're walking on thin ice, so you've got to test the ice beforehand. Try on the other side. So by maintaining that quality of equilibrium in movement, we maintain the space within the body, and within that space, we feel the movement within the body, the flow, the momentum, the energy, able to move without restriction, nothing forced. So there's just a natural harmonizing, balancing of that movement. Any areas that are tight, if you imagine a river, a nice slowly flowing river going down, then if you came along and put a sort of like weir in, or you just dropped a big rock in, it would disrupt the flow of the river, and the tension, the stiffness that we feel will do that. But equally, eventually the river will wear the rock away. So the movement itself will start to sort of maintain itself, I suppose you could say. Raising your toes and your hips. When you get more experienced at this, you raise your toes, same the front foot, put the foot down, and before you move the weight, apply just a bit of pressure. And likewise, with the back foot, once the foot is on the floor, just apply that little bit of pressure as though you're just trying to push the foot beneath the surface of the floor a little bit. Imagine if you're walking on sand, especially if you're walking or paddling in the sea, but you put your foot down, the surface is quite loose. You just push down until you find something firmer underneath. And then bring your foot in. And that helps you just really reinforce that connection to the ground, the foundation of the movement. It also just slows you down a little bit. It's very easy for this exercise to become, oh, I'm going to do this, and so on and so forth. Remember, it's not a race. So in the same way, when you take a step through, whichever direction, before you move your weight, if you can, just gently press in. And then back the other way. So as much as possible, maintaining your root, your alignment, your central equilibrium through the movement. Shake out. Good. Now put your right foot forward, mirror my movements. So we use those movements to generate movements in the arms. So rest your weight back, hold your hands over your belly, push your weight forwards and feel how that movement will push your hands forwards like this. It's like there's a balloon inflating behind your hands, and then your elbows get pushed out, drawing your fingers apart. The pigeon spreads its wings. Your hands are still in front of your shoulders here, and they don't go above shoulder and back. Pushing forwards like a wave, pushing your arms out. And again, we feel the movement coming up to our body through belly, through solar plexus, through chest. So again, see, you can see how it feels just to take that in breath when you're forwards in that position, if it's comfortable. Now let your hands drop down. Feel the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders. Push forward, leaving your hands behind a bit as though you were in water. And then as you settle into your front foot, that's when your hands swing past. And then back in the same way. There's always a temptation to do this, but you can see that's pulling me forwards. So this is fisherman cast a net. Just allowing your arms to swing, feeling what's happening through chest and upper back. There's all sorts of little associated changes and movements that happen before the movement reaches your arms. It's not just the forward and backward movement in your legs. So for instance, here, as I move forwards, here, just in front of the shoulder, the muscles there and the fascia there, extending outwards, and then they contract, bringing your arm in. When I go back, that feeling is across my back, and I go back. There's other movements as well. Just observe, see what's going on, see which movements are useful to you, and which ones you might want to try and just eliminate. You're straining in your arms, for instance. I don't want to strain in my arms. This time, bringing your hands back, elbows going out slightly. Turn your hands again, drop your wrist down, push forwards. And this is pushing waves. So that wave-like movement from your back foot comes up through your belly, pushing the hands away, and your hands just swing upwards. So not trying to lift your hands. Don't do this or this. You see from the shape of the arm, again, I'll come a little bit closer, and you can see there. As I go forward, it's quite difficult to keep your hand down. I'd have to, if I wanted to keep my hand the same height, I'd have to sort of push downwards. But for this movement, it's just natural for the hands to come up. That helps to keep your shoulders nice and soft. These first three movements that we've made have all been facing forwards. So there's been no significant turning in the center of your body, horizontal turning. There may well have been a vertical adjustment as you transferred your weight. But now we're going to turn. So as you come back, you bring your hands down and you turn to your left. And that brings your hands down to the left hip. Rotate your hands so the palms are forward, move forwards towards the front leg, turn, like you're drawing your fingers through water. Well, obviously, as your hands swing, there's a very slight curve here. Just quite, you're not lifting your hands again, but they're attached to your shoulders, so they'll curve. So now this time, as you come back, drawing your fingers through, just let that curve continue. Feel the expansion to the left side of your body. Go forwards, turn, feel the expansion. An expansion very similar to, what was I going to say? Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So it's a figure of eight movement, or a bit like the infinity sign, combining the transfer of your weight with the expansion and contraction in the rhythm of the movement, with the turning in the center of your body. And when you go into your back foot, if it's comfortable, you raise your front toes, bring your foot in as you raise your hands, step forwards, pull up the foot and down. So we start to feel, again, the whole body moving. Start to feel that connection between hands and feet. If I exaggerate it here, you see, I'm going to bring my knee right up, and then as the hands come down, foot comes down. Bring my foot up and down. You don't have to bring the foot up. If you're going to do it, bring it in a little bit first and then just raise your knee. You will wobble around. This is quite useful to wobble around because our response, again, is going to be different to a very common and conditioned response, which is we get to someone like this and we're, oh, I'm wobbling around. What I really want to do here is to drop, if I can. You get used to that feeling of just allowing your center of gravity to drop. And then just shake out. That last idea is a very useful idea. If you slip or stumble, you might just be able to wave your arms around and keep yourself upright for long enough to get the foot down safely. Hopefully you would do. But we often find ourselves sort of standing like this, and and ask yourself at this point just exactly what are you holding on to, because it's thin air. This is not going to support you for very long. And the way to play with this is to hold on to something. I'm standing next to the wall here, and you're like, oh, I'm a bit wobbly. So you just put your hand on the wall to steady yourself, and then see if you can get that dropping in your hip. Once you've felt it, it's easier to reproduce. So left foot forwards, starting with starting with pigeon spreads its wings. I beg your pardon. Expanding in the upper body, in the front of your body, and then contracting. Maybe aware of the counter movement that as you push up and your arms go out, there's a drawing in between your shoulder blades, and then that opens out as you go back. So the front expands almost like the water's being pumped into your belly and your chest, and then pumped back into your back. And that too becomes part of the dynamic of the movement. Not just moving through water, but moving like water. Change this time to fisherman cast a net. And then pushing wave, or as it's sometimes known, pushing a wave. So we have potentially two images to work with here. One is the image of the wave moving through our body, moving the body, moving our arms. Again, the idea of expanding in the front of your body like with pigeon spreads its wings. We can also use the image of pushing against the wave, pushing against water. So there's a sort of, if you like, an internal and an external aspect to this movement. It's a movement that we find in the Tai Chi forms, and in the Tai Chi forms, really all the movements have that internal and external element, because we're concerned with what's happening still within the inner landscape of the body and the energy and the movement and so on, our alignments. But also, because it's a martial art, potentially concerned with what's happening outside the body. So there's a sort of aspect of relationship there. And then change into the figure of eight movement, expanding and contracting, and expanding and contracting. So that awareness that we bring to the movement, that awareness of what's happening within the inner landscape of the body and how we're relating to the environment around us, helps us to find the correct way to move. There's something about awareness that seems to amplify movement when we want it to. A bit like being in a crowded room with lots of people talking, and just focusing your attention on one person and hearing their voice sort of appear out of the crowd. So I'm coming in, raising your heel, bringing your foot in, put the toes down if you don't feel steady enough. You'll see me doing this exercise, and if it's comfortable for you, it's nice to be able to bring the foot up. But you might see me go to do that sometimes. I kind of bring the foot in, I'm about to lift it up, and it's like, no, I need that foot. I need that foot down. This time, step through again. And then if it's comfortable, reversing that, going the other direction. One more time. If you are interested in, being on one leg, try and think about what you're doing. Try not to think of it as a balance. If I balance something, say if I get this pole again and I hold it in the exact middle and eventually it'll balance, that's fine. The trouble with balance is as soon as I apply just a slight bit of pressure on one end, like this, it changes. So balance is a constantly changing quality. What we're looking for here is stability, and we get that through alignment and rooting down. If I was balanced like this, then as soon as I do this, there's a change. And in particular, if I was balanced here, like a set of kitchen scales, and I did that, I'd go off. Or I'd have to adjust somehow or another. But we don't need to do that in Tai Chi. We align, we root down, we find that stability, and with that stability, it's like a tree. The branches can go out in all sorts of directions. So I change the perspective there. Okay, rubbing your hands together. And then tapping over your face, the palms of your fingers. Over your head and neck. Down one shoulder and your arm. Inside. Your back. And around your hips. Light on your belly. The upper part of your chest. So to close, embracing tiger, return to mountain. Again, this idea of a return, a constantly changing cycle, but one that brings you through that point of central equilibrium. And everything that's implied in terms of both body and mind with that. So as you go into the exercise, sinking down, pushing up, bringing your hands around as though you're holding the ball against your chest, drawing your hands in and down. It could be that you've got a kind of internal image of that feeling of equilibrium that you're coming back to. It could be that you're feeling the pull of gravity pulling you down into that state. It could be something to do with the image of the mountain, or lots of other things could come into play. Whatever sort of begins to draw you back. If you fancy using the breathing as you bring your hands in here, take a breath in. So we associate the out breath with that settling down. And these are all useful little tools that we can take with us into our daily life. Those moments when we need to settle both physically and mentally, to quieten our thoughts, to calm down, to get that little bit of space. We have a way of doing it. We have something that will draw us in. My first teacher used to say to us about this sunk posture, this rooted posture, that we would find ourselves standing like this in the supermarket queue. These are valuable things for us in our daily lives. So one more time. And stand. shake out. Thank you very much. So some ideas to play with there, hopefully.
Yeah, cheers.